On behalf of Ray Hillenbrand, in case some of you don't know him, and Don Matson, Dan Tribby, and Gene Williams, and myself, we want to thank everybody for taking time out of your schedule to come here tonight. Jason Green, the city attorney, is here just to observe and assist to make sure we do proper procedure as far as what we talk about and relate to make sure it's straight. And Jason, do you have anything you want to add to that? We want to make sure it's okay.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the City Council hasn't expressed a view one way or the other on this, and if this moves forward, or when this moves forward, the City Council will have public hearings of their own. They'll have to have 2 readings of an ordinance, so there'll be plenty of opportunity for the council's input and participation at that time. So the fact that I'm here, you shouldn't read anything into that as far as any statement by the City Council one way or the other on this issue. I'm here to attempt to answer questions and make sure that the information that comes out is consistent with the intended proposal. That's about it.
So if he interrupts me, it's okay. That means I'm off center a little bit. Once again, I'm glad to see all of you here, as we all will be affected by the presentation tonight. So that's why we're here. As you entered this room, I'm sure everyone had a wide range of concerns about the proposed DID, which stands for Downtown Improvement District, and what course it's going to be taking along with the direction for our city center. The purpose of this meeting is to be transparent and have a dialogue with you to make sure everyone is informed about the Main Street Square, which is what you see in the pictures back here, in its relationship with the Downtown Improvement District. As we proceed, we plan on having a question and answer period at the end of our presentations. So if you have any questions, keep track of them, and at the end of our presentations, we want you, encourage you to stand up and to have dialogue with us. As I was preparing to what I was going to say tonight, I was asking myself, how did I get in this position to be here in front of you? First of all, I grew up in the 60s, and the draft was off, so I figured I couldn't have gotten drafted, but I think I did into doing this. So, and looking at that, I said, well, how can I explain to you how I felt I got here? So I want to briefly take a few minutes to go over the history of the events over the past few months that brought us to this point tonight. Back in July, I was contacted about a tax district that would create a tax on a portion of downtown Rapid City that was being proposed to the city council. So a group of concerned business people, owners, met concerning this tax district. As we discussed this tax, how the funds were to be used, the taxing structure, we concluded at that point it was unfair and the tax district was not needed. There also were rumors floating around that 90% of the businesses in the district were in favor of it. We wanted to know, was that true? So we all got together, we created a small document that we passed around in opposition to this tax, and we had approximately 150 signatures on those documents. And I think some of you people here probably signed that document. This core group continued to meet. A lot of them are here tonight. In fact, Don and Gene was also involved in this core group. And to discuss our options and how we want to proceed. At one of our meetings, Dan Tribby with Prairie Edge attended that meeting. He later contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to meet with both himself and Ray. I asked Don Matson if he would attend it with me, and an open dialogue proceeded from that point on. From the beginning, the 10 of our meetings, I have to say, were very positive, as both sides learned about the other's positions. And soon a question came up, especially from Ray, is there any possibilities of compromise to make this work? We shared that there could be a possible compromise, but we had some major hurdles to overcome about the makeup of the proposed Downtown Improvement District. Some of the hurdles that floated around back then that we were very concerned about was the funding as set forth in their budget for projects like downtown image enhancements, clean and safe programs, associated equipment, parking, the promotion of the downtown area, along with the tax structure, would not be acceptable. As our conversations continued, we shared that we might be receptive to a dialogue if the funds were to be used more for an economic development type atmosphere, to enhance our city center, increase the foot traffic, increase the income producing value of our properties, and ultimately bring new businesses and vitalization to our city center. It was like a light went on in all of us in the meetings, and the DID now took a whole new approach. The Main Street Square became the focal point of our negotiations, along with redirecting the downtown improvement funds and to the success of the Main Street Square. At that point, Mr. Hillebrand shared his goals for the Main Street Square along with his vision for our city center and how he'd like to see our city grow over the upcoming years. We soon came to an appreciation for Ray that I never wake up every day to worry about what's going to happen to the lot next to me or what the city center is going to look like. And I really appreciated Ray looking in the future and saying, we want something to happen to our city to take it from good to a lot better. Through all these negotiations, we feel now that we came up with a better proposal that was originally proposed, and that if the Main Street Square becomes a reality, it's not a reality yet, but if it becomes a reality, the proposed downtown improvement district that we have negotiated would be the fairest for all businesses involved. Some of the highlights of the DRD, which is really important for us all to know right now, are that everything associated with a downtown improvement district will be transparent. There will be annual meetings where detailed financial statements are reviewed along with next year's proposed budget. Also, a review of upcoming projects would be discussed. All meetings, whether they're annual meetings, board meetings, or whatever, the public is able to attend. There is nothing private about it. Irregardless of what area of the DID the funds come from, we felt they need to be spent, for the entire taxing district. All funds, collected will only be used for care, management, operational programs, and the success of the Main Street Square Plaza in future projects that would encourage economic development. That's the only way the funds would be spent. No funds will be used for individual properties or areas that duplicate existing efforts of the city. Repair, upkeep, and beautification as originally proposed shall remain the responsibility of the property owners requiring them. The board of directors of this DID will direct, allocate, control, and monitor all funds. The use of the funds must be in accordance with the proposal set forth in the DID. Once the DID is set up and the funds are directed a certain way, they cannot change. They have to be spent in that procedure. All actions of the board as to request of funds will be approved by the city council. So the board cannot just say, gee, I think we'll ask for X dollars. They have to prove that they need the funds, and it has to be approved by the city council. The board for the downtown improvement district was negotiated to be made up of 10 property owners. They have to have property within the DID. 6 would come from the Core 1 area and 4 from the Zone 2 area. And that's based on, as a projection of the funds coming in, 60% of the funds would come from Zone 1 or the core area, and the other 40% from the outlying areas. The mayor will appoint all board, and the council must approve. Therefore, everyone in the DID has a voice in the makeup of the board. You contact your city council members or the mayor as far as who you'd like to see on the board, or if you have any problems with people on the board. The caps that were established would be, the cap for Zone 1 would stay the same as was proposed in the original DID of $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed value. So if you get your cards, you see your assessed value, divide by 1,000 times $1.50, and that would be your rate for Zone 1. Zone 2 will be assessed at 75 cents, half the price, per $1,000 of assessed value. So if you have a $500,000 property in your outlying area, which most of us are from, okay, that would be 500 times 75 cents, so you're approximately just over $400 of assessed value. There will be a cap of $3,000 per property or parcel in both zones, and all funds collected cannot exceed this cap. The $3,000 cap will increase each year by an appropriate percent as allowed by state statute to keep pace with the assessed values. So most of us wouldn't hit the cap, but those that are at the cap, that cap would increase. Let's say our assessed values are going up 5% a year, the cap would also go up 5% a year, because we wanted to make sure that it was fair across the board, that the people not reaching the cap are slowly increasing to the ones that are at the cap. Let's keep that spread in there. Any changes to the basic tax structure can only be implemented through the same process as we're using right now. It has to go to legal and finance, it has to be notified, it has to go to the city council. So nothing can be run through. Once again, In our negotiations, we felt everything has to be transparent. The zones, as you'll be able to see on the chart over here, Zone 1 is the center of the city, and the Zone 2 is the outlying areas. The board is limited to no other special assessments other than the DID. The DID is technically a special assessment, I believe. No other special assessments can be initiated by the board. The DID will stand or fall on the approval of the Main Street Square. If this, what you see back here, and as we get through what Ray will present to us, if ultimately the city council rejects that proposal, this DID is dead. That was part of our negotiations. We want to give the process, let's say it is approved, we want to give the process a 5-year window to give it a chance to work. After that 5-year window, if it's not doing the plans of what we all expected it to do, you know, the growth of the city and to bring more business down in the foot traffic, then at that point the board could be petitioned and we would go to the city council to ask for dissolvement of the downtown improvement district. So in a nutshell, that's basically what through the last 3-4 months, the negotiations, the back and forth that we have done with Ray and Dan, Don and I and Gene, we've tried to come up with what we felt was, if we were going to have a tax district, what would be the best for all of us, and that's what we've come up with. So now I want to turn it over to Ray to give a presentation on the Main Street Square. And like I said, I appreciate Ray. I mean, for him to go through, he has put his money where his mouth is, and he has funded and gone through to get what we see here, to see if this could become a reality. If it doesn't, as Ray says, it goes away too. But let's give Ray a really good fair hearing to see exactly the benefits of what the Main Street Square could do.
Thank you, Mike. I too want to thank all of you for being here tonight. You know, I consider this meeting probably the most important meeting we've had thus far in this process. You know, and I think the process is a good one. For you that don't know me, I'm involved with Prairie Edge, and I am also head of the board of Destination Rapid City. I too want to thank Don, Dan Tribby, Gene, and Mike for making this happen. The purpose of the DID, when we got together, I got to tell the story too. Mike told you a little bit about it, but how we first started to talk to each other. Dan, who I work with at Prairie Edge, went to a meeting that Mike was the speaker at. And when he came, after that meeting, he came back and he said, Ray, he said, you know, you really need to sit down with Mike. He said, he's a believable guy. And he said, you need to talk to him. And I said, sure, let's do it. So that was our first meeting. We've had many meetings since then. At all of those meetings, and I'd say 20 or 30 hours spent just discussing everything. And on all of those meetings, Mike and I were there. Don was at the first meeting, but right after that, he went to have a stent put in at Mayo Clinic, you know, so he couldn't participate in those meetings. He's just now getting back to where he's part of everything again, and he was in our last meeting today. Dan was in most of the meetings, and recently Gene came on board for the last 2 meetings or so, you know, to help us put this in final form. Mike says it's a compromise. You know, I always say that what happened was that Mike got me on board, you know, as to how this could be a better thing. And that's our whole goal, was to make it the right thing and a better thing. I, in turn, got the Destination Rapid City board on board, you know, to go along with this compromise. So what's this proposal all about? Mike told you, but, you know, to me, it's a real simple thing, and he reiterated that. Should Main Street Square be a reality? And if it should, this DID should go through. If Main Street Square shouldn't be a reality, then it should be not go through. You know, it's just as simple as that to me. And I'd like to help explain why, you know, I think Main Street Square is going to be a really good thing for the future of our community as a whole, not just Zone 1. You know, there's a vision that a lot of people have on how this city is progressing and how what you might call the city center is progressing. You know, we have a nice city center now. There's just no question about it, you know, to do it. But it could even be better. And eventually our city center could be something that not only involves what's in Zone 1 and 2, but it also could extend to the campus of the school mines, you know, and that could be brought in. And I want to explain that a little bit later on. But if we look at how we get from here to there, Main Street Square is only a small part of it. but it's a very big part of it because it's the start of that progress. As I said, we right now have a very good city center. We have unique shops. We have unique restaurants and bars. We have living quarters for a great mix of people. We have good hotels and motels. We have a significant new doll center. We have significant new library improvements. We have presidents on corners that kind of go throughout the area. And we have a lot of owners of buildings that did their own facade improvement and tried to bring back some of the old regalness that really was at downtown. And the city got involved, you know, some of the streetscapes they did, and by building the first of what we hope will be many ramps, you know, for city parking. But there's a lot of good things committed to, too, now. They're not a reality yet, but there are things that are going to happen because they're on the board and fairly fully committed to. One is that the community theater is going to be relocated to the Dakota Middle School. You know, that section of the city center really is, you know, what I call the visual and performing arts section of our city center, you know, and this is another step that emphasizes that. The school board now, I know, is considering what else should be done with the Dakota Middle School. And you know, there might be other things that come out of that that are similar to that, that really help the downtown become more vibrant. We also have the project, which is shown right here in the big frame thing, which is a city-private project, you know, partnership, which is a group headed by Brian Vulcan, or the private part of it. You know, it's an investment. It's a for-profit investment. That particular structure is catty corner across the street from the Alex Johnson Hotel, at the corner of where 6th Street and St. Joseph Street come together on the other side from Tally's and catty corner across the street. That's a great project. You know, the city's involved in that is significant more parking, much more parking that's taken away by building it there. The part is of parking above ground, inside, and also parking underground. I can't explain this project. I don't think Brian's here tonight, and I wish he was because he could explain it. But he's going to have living quarters in there. He's going to have more retail shops in there, and he's going to have non-retail businesses in there, more jobs and those kind of things that are brought downtown. And then if you look at what the Bradsky family is going to do with the Alex Johnson Hotel, you know, they're going to renovate that to bring it back as much as practical to its old glory over time. You know, I have always felt, since I moved to Rapid City in 1980, that the Alex Johnson was the hallmark of downtown, and it should be that in the future. I mean, that's a great structure. It's got a lot of history, and it's got a lot of feeling, you know, and that's what they plan on doing. Those are things that are in the mill. But the biggest thing is, where do you go from there? You know, what are the things that could really make this something that, as I always like to say, goes from very good to being really great? One thing that you might visualize is, I call the 6th Street Promenade, but a pedestrian-friendly walkway, a walkway that is more friendly to pedestrians and traffic, that goes all the way from Dakota Middle School, and whatever that turns out to be, down to the Civic Center, that crosses Omaha Street in a pedestrian-friendly way, and that makes Memorial Park in downtown one, you know, so that people feel very comfortable walking down there on their lunch or anything else, that people from the Civic Center feel comfortable coming downtown, you know, but it's just all one thing, you know, to do it. When Omaha Street was built, it was built for all the right reasons, but it ended up being the Great Wall of China, as far as making it being comfortable to go from downtown there by foot. You know, this is going to change, and I think when that happens too, you're going to see a very unusual change in the utilization and the meaning of a Memorial Park, you know, to our citizens in our community. But that can be a terrific thing. There's no question we need more parking. You know, we need parking from the private sector and also the public sector, you know, that's located in the areas of Zone 1 and Zone 2 where the need is. Things that can serve the people that live there, that work there, and that visit there. We need more living quarters for all income levels. You know, I mean, that's no question about that. We need more destination shops downtown. And when I talk about destination shops, I'm not talking about big box shops. I'm talking about shops that are owned by local people, where the community residents come because they're special shops, and they'll make a special trip to go visit, you know, and the people in the area will do that. We need more of those. And then we need more non-retail businesses that have good jobs for all levels of people, you know, that skill levels of people to do it. And this kind of ties in with what you might try to take a picture and start to think of how could that happen, you know, and then you start to think of Homestake Mine and the lab that's going to go there. And if that really becomes a reality, what type of businesses and people is that going to attract to our area? You know, there are going to be a lot of scientists. There are going to be a lot of people that work with them. There's going to be a lot of businesses, you know, that also are associated with them to help them with some of their research. There's going to be a lot of projects with the School of Mine, you know, that makes that work with the people at the Home State Lab and businesses that work with the School of Mine. And then you say, well, you know, if that's going to happen, where should these people that are involved with that want to live, or what should be a very top choice of that? And where should be a top choice of where they locate their businesses? You know, these are non-retail businesses. These are good job businesses, you know, beyond the retail level. You know, and then you say, you know, if we can make everything happen to make downtown a really vibrant place, you know, this could be one of their top choices, is to locate those things downtown, you know, and to be part of that. But we have to be ready for them. You know, we're ready for them to some extent right now, but we can be much more ready for them in the future if some things happen, of which I think Main Street Square is, you know, is really a big part of it. And then the last thing I want to talk about what you might say is long vision is to have plazas or squares located throughout the Dallas City Center area, to have those that serve the needs of the people in that area. You know, there's no question that Main Street Square, you know, serves more what are people in Zone 1 initially at least, but it's a step into where that leads us further on. So then I say, why Main Street Square? And that's what I'm here about, so all that other stuff was just kind of leading. But Main Street Square is really the cornerstone of the future to make us go from very good to really great. Why Main Street Square? You know, it's interesting how that came about too. But the Convention and Visitors Bureau hired a consultant by, it was Brooks and Associates or something like that, to help them decide how we could attract more people to the area, more people to the convention, and how we could make them stay in the Rapid City area longer. You know, that was their purpose, you know, for making that study. They came up with a report that they called the Great American Road Trip. And it was a wonderful report. If you want to get it sometime, you should go down there and try to read it. But what they said is that, you know, you really have a great thing going on in our region, and you could get the people to center in Rapid City and then spend maybe a week here. And in that week, they would go to the Badlands, they would go to Wall Drug, they would go to Custer State Park, they would go to Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse, they would go to Devil's Tower, they would go to Deadwood, but they could stay in Rapid City. Now, why would they stay in Rapid City? Well, they would stay in Rapid City if you had a really vibrant downtown where people in our community of all ages wanted to come in the daytime and also in the evening. If you have a vibrant downtown for the community in the evening, you know, the visitors are going to come there too, and they're going to want to stay there. They also said that when visitors come to the area, tourists, you know, 60% of the money they spend is after 6 o'clock in the evening. And right now, the majority of that certainly isn't spent in the Rapid City area. You know, it's spent elsewhere. But if that 60% could be spent in the Rapid City area, you know, that in itself would be, you know, a really terrific thing. So that got us thinking. And then a group of us got together and created Destination Rapid City. It was created initially solely for one purpose only, and that purpose was to help the city make what Roger Brooks called a plaza happen. And he initially made a big study of where that plaza should be located, and it's actually the whole block of now where Main Street Square is located. But he wanted to go all the way, you know, from 6th Street to 5th Street in that block, tear everything down, build this great big thing, you know, that could be an attraction to come down. Okay, so we did that. Then we formed Destination Rapid City, and we started to say, how can we help make this plaza happen? We contacted a group in the East, a nonprofit organization called People for Public Places. The sole purpose of this organization is to describe how is to help make any public place something that is viable and used by the people or the purpose for which it's for. So not to create an architectural monument or anything like that, but it's to make these things really work for what they were. And we hired them to come down and formed a special subcommittee to say, okay, where should this plaza be, you know, and what should it be? Not what should it be, where should it be? They picked the same site, except they said the parking lot's plenty, you know, to do it. We also then took on our own to hire an architect so that when we went to City Council to make the initial presentation on why Main Street Square might become a reality, we wanted to be sure we knew what it was all about. And in that process, and this is funded by our funds, not any city funds, but when we did that, we said what we want to do is to get the best architect available that has a history of success in establishing plazas or parks of this nature, in the United States, of our size, that thing. We selected a group out of Muncie, Indiana called Rundell Associates. They've had a very successful history of creating plazas in communities of our size and that sort of a thing to do it. So we worked on that, and then we worked on the initial DID proposal, to say what might be we can propose. And, it was wrong. We lost our focus in some of those things, and that's where the discussions with Mike really led to something that's really good. But there are three things that'll make Main Street Square a reality, or one of which, without it, it doesn't happen. First of all, we need city help. It's got to be city property. The city has to own it. We're going to need city funding. This thing is going to cost about $6.5 million. The city is going to have to be willing to come up with a maximum of perhaps $3.5 million of that. And then the city has to furnish some infrastructure, whatever that might be, that goes along with it. We need Destination Rapid City help. Destination Rapid City has to raise a minimum of $3 million from the private sector, and they have to continue paying the architectural fees, to see how that is. And then we need the DID help, because the DID is the thing that really makes the operating and ongoing management of the square a reality. That's where the funds come from, is the DID, to make Main Street Square. Once Main Street Square is a reality, and hopefully even self-sustaining, then the DID board can decide, well, is that enough? Do we want to fold up the DID? Or do we want to take these funds and use some of them or all of them to create plazas in different places, or anything else that might be appropriate at that time in order to keep this, what I hope will be momentum, going. But without any one of those three, there's no Main Street Square, there is no Destination Rapid City. We fold up our tent and go home at Destination Rapid City if Main Street Square doesn't become a reality. So, I think that when you think about this, you think about the lab, you think about the school minds being involved, you think about, this downtown or city center area starting to become more vibrant in so many ways, that you got more people living down here, you got new businesses down here, you got other businesses that want to be here because it's a neat city and a neat place to live. You've got this memorial park to Dakota Middle School becoming, just one big campus, so to speak, that is really friendly. And you got to say, that's pretty neat. That really is pretty neat. But Main Street Square is the start of that, but it's just the start. It's a small piece. But without that, I don't think the momentum to go beyond that will really happen. And if you look at this, all of us that are involved in this, the property owners and the businesses, our primary concern has to be, well, how does that really affect me, the people I work with, and my business and its success? It's got to be your primary concern. But beyond that, I think all of us have to have a little bit of what I call motherhood, and that might be a nebulous term, but, something that says, what are we going to leave for our community that will make it a better place for our kids and grandkids and hopefully for ourselves in the future? And, if this city center type thing is really something that makes sense to us, then maybe that motherhood also plays a small part in what our decision making might be. But if this becomes a reality, and if we go down the path that some of us envision, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that within most of our lifetimes, maybe not mine, that Rapid City will be the most outstanding city in the West for any community of its size. And I really and truly believe that. But we've got to have a little bit of motherhood. We've got to take a very key step to begin with Main Street Square, and then we have to follow through. That's my presentation. I will now turn it back to Mike. What? Well, I was going to then describe all of these things, but I'm not sure you need it because a lot of you looked at it. This is the winter scene of Main Street Square. It shows an ice skating rink. That's a portable ice skating rink, so to speak, that has its own cooling system. Will be taken up when it's not being farmer's market was there, what that would be like in the summertime in the spring. And this is where the city gets involved. See, we want to be able to make that alley, just an emergency alley only, and be able to be used for things like that space, where it becomes real usable space. This is the same thing in the summertime, that shows it. This is when the ice rink is not there anymore, sod is put in every year, and then we have a mountain that's there permanently, but it gets submerged in the wintertime, and sometimes the ice in the summertime again. This is, here's the parking ramp, the northwest warehouse. This is the corner of 6th and Main Street. Over here, we have, kind of the same thing, but just shows you a little bit. This is right now what we call the city center, and what's involved in what we're discussing here today. This is where, hopefully in the future, it could be expanded, move down to the school mines, and have this campus be really something wonderful. And here is what we call Zone 1 and Zone 2. This is Zone 1, Mike talking about it, $1.50, and this is Zone 2, which is at 75 cents. This is the project that I just told you, that catty corner across the street from the Alex Johnson Hotel. I have nothing to do with this, but and I hope I explain it right. This here is indoor parking, which the city's involved. There's parking underground. These are living quarters. The first floors will be new retail shops, and the upstairs of the rest of it will be non-retail jobs, for people that will be working downtown. This is kind of a plat of where the Main Street Square would be again, the Sears building, the parking garage and all of this stuff. Shows you the scene. And this is just a nice thing in the summertime, of what could be there and what it looks like, ideally, So that's our image, that's my spiel. Back to you. And thank you very much for listening to me.
There's no question that as you look at the Main Street Square and how everything's laid out, that depending where you're located at your business, some people are going to see an immediate benefit, I think, from the Main Street Square. Some might see a trickle-down benefit, and quite frankly, there's a lot of people in here that probably won't see or will see very, very little benefit from the square. So to me, it boils down to, if you believe in it, do you feel that we've come up with a tax district that would be acceptable to support the Main Street Square? It's pretty much what it boils down to. I hope that we've tried to negotiate in good faith for the people that we all met with in the beginning, that if this was a reality, what could we live with? And I think we feel that the proposal that we've come up with is about the best that we could. We've tried our best to keep it fair for all of you out there, because, let's face it, everybody in this room is the heart of Rapid City too. Without all of us, we don't have a downtown Rapid City. So we don't want anybody to be affected adversely by it. That's not the goal behind it. That wasn't the goal why we were brought into the negotiations. We just tried to do what we could for everybody here. So we want to open it up for questions. Feel free. If you're for it, please say why you're for it. If it doesn't work for you, it's okay. Say why it doesn't work for you, because that's the purpose of this meeting, is to get a feel how everybody's thinking. And that's why we invited the council members here to sit into it, so that they can get, a little bit of a grasp of how everybody's thinking. I can tell you, in the very beginning, I was, as a lot of you know, of course, I was brought to the head of the group that totally against it. There wasn't even a doubt in my mind, based on the existing structure. After listening to Ray and working out the compromise, I've got to be honest, I don't have a problem with the Main Street Square. I personally think I can see some value of it, but that's my opinion. In my shop, I don't know how my partner feels, but my shop, I feel I would invest the dollars in the tax district to help support an ongoing basis. I changed my opinion on it. Based on the negotiations, I think, and the sincerity of Ray in his presentation. I think, Don and Gene, they can speak for themselves, but we really want to hear also from you guys too how you feel. So we don't have mics set up. I'm just narrating, so if you do, raise your hand. We'll call on if you want. Where you're at, feel comfortable, just stand. And maybe state, who you are, whether you're a property owner, so we have an idea, if the council does, or if you're a business owner. To me, you're both of the same value, because I'll tell you, the business owners, if you're renting, you're probably going to pay for the tax. So it'll be passed down. So let us know if you think there's value in what we've talked about tonight. or if not. So I'll open it up, I'll go back, and you can direct to any of us you want. Yes?
Can you tell us where the lines are between zone 1 and zone 2?
Sure. The lines in Zone 1, basically, if you look at it from Omaha Street, on the south side of Omaha Street, goes to Kansas City Street, both sides. Okay, that would be the southern side, both sides of Kansas City Street. It would go from A Street, both sides of A Street, over to Fifth Street, both sides. That's the core area. Okay, that's Zone 1. Zone 2 is anything that would outlay. Got to use this. I want to do this. Anything on the outside. There we go. Did that answer it? Okay. Good question. Anybody else? And it is right here. Feel free to come up so you can kind of see where you're at. Yes.
I have a short string of questions, so if you could entertain me through it, I appreciate it. First, with the new fee structure, Aaron Costello, keen interest in downtown, young, I plan on raising my family here, and I love hanging out in a cool downtown. So, my first question is, with the new fee structure, how much will the DID raise per year? Or just to say, in year 1?
First of all, in year 1, from what I understand, after we talked to Jason. Okay. Talking to Jason, you can only ask for funds that would match your budget. Of course, year 1 and year 2, your fees will probably be quite reduced because that's during the construction phase, and there'll be very minimal amounts of fees going out. Once the park is in full use, of course, then it would probably go to the cap at the 75 cents, you know, in the $1.50, which would probably raise, I think we're thinking.
Right now, if it was in effect, the full bore, it's estimated that it would raise about $148,000, of which $88,000 would come from Zone 1 and the rest from Zone 2. That's how the 60-40 split comes. That would be if it was in a full effect right now.
So right now, the maximum it would raise is $148,000.
Would be $148,000. That's right.
Okay, and you mentioned the board of directors, and I think that's a fine idea. Will there be any individual salaries financed through the DID?
There will be no current individual salaries that will be financed through the DID. But in order to make the Main Street Square a success, I feel fairly confident that the DID board will want to have a manager of it, unless they want to manage it themselves. And that particular manager will have to be paid, and that's what part of the funds would go for, would to be to pay that manager, whoever that manager might be.
Okay. My next question is, you talked about the future of downtown as a whole, and I look at this map, and I see Zone 1 and Zone 2, and I think about Main Street Square, that's in Zone 1. I think about 6th Street, that's in Zone 1. What plans are there for Zone 2? Like, what is the next step after Main Street Square goes in and it's a success? What comes next?
Well, that's up to the DID board, 100%. But I think when we negotiated all of this, we said that we hope that the DID board, will do nothing with the money until Main Street Square is a success. Once it becomes a success, then it's up to the DID board what to do, at that time. And I don't know how long that'll be, but it'll certainly be more than 3 years or 4 years. At that time, hopefully, other visions will come on. Should there be other plazas located in Zone 2? Should there be one near Dakota Middle School? Should there be one somewhere else? Or whatever else might be it. Or should that be the end of those funds? But that's how you get Zone 2, the people of Zone 2, really get something that primarily benefits them, is by expanding the funds in the future into projects that go into that area.
I totally agree, Ray, which is why I'm a little bit troubled when I hear you say, should we dissolve it at the end of Main Street Square?
Well, listen, if this thing isn't a success, I might have to leave town. And Mike, too.
Let's hope that's not the case.
I don't. In the reason, I guess, in the negotiations, I felt that needed to be in there is I wanted to protect Zone 2 from the standpoint of that if it wasn't becoming a benefit to Zone 2, the people in there, that they had the ability, we call it like a sunset clause, that there was something out there that we could say it's just not working for us. We're glad we did what we did, but it's time for us to bail out.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I mean, I live next, or my shop is next to an open lot. I'd love to see something great going there. And I'm hoping that as this progresses, and the reason I've been on board is that from the outlying areas, we'll start coming up with some ideas too that we can help make this thing grow. And that would be, and the board needs to listen to those ideas too. It's not just a board for Zone 1, it's a board for everybody. Because like I said, the original funds from Zone 2, I mean, let's face it, we're putting 100% of our funds into the advancement of Zone 1. And that's why we negotiate a lesser rate. But we're betting that it will stretch out. If it didn't, I wouldn't have been involved.
And let me just add too, that if at the end of Main Street Square, if it becomes a success, and if that vision starts to happen that we kind of talked about for a broader area, if there aren't extremely meaningful projects that need to be done in Zone 2, so that, then, we haven't gone very far.
Thanks. Just a comment to close. I really think a project like this needs a vision through 5 or 10 years plus. You've got a lot. Zone 1 is like 1/4 of the entire area. And man, I don't know what the odds are with your bet, but certainly hope the odds makers are on your side.
We couldn't agree with you more. I mean, if this doesn't go beyond Zone 1, the Main Street Square, then we didn't accomplish a whole lot.
Mary Renka, Black Hills Psychiatry Associates, and most of you have heard me. I sound like a broken record. This is not going to help us. It might increase our property assessed value. That doesn't help us. We're a medical clinic. We can't raise our rates, and we try not to. Number one, we take deep cuts to take Medicare and Medicaid because we feel people deserve good medical care regardless of what their insurance is. And we're not going to stick it to the rest of the population in order to make up for what Medicare and Medicaid doesn't pay. So I see our property assessed value going up, 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 and our taxes going up, 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 and we have no way to recoup. We're not going to get walk-in traffic. That's not the way medical works now. We love being downtown. We've been there for 30 years. We don't want to leave. But I don't see how this is going to help us. And if it's going to help the whole community, then I think the whole community should join in and help. Let's have a tax that the whole community can join in and pay. I just don't see how this is going to help our business. And I don't mean to be narrow-minded about it. But the bottom line is we're losing money as it is as a medical clinic. We have no way of recouping these additional taxes. We have no way of recouping these additional taxes.
Mary, thanks for the comment, and you're probably right.
I'm Charlie Ray. Charlie Ray. I have the property on the corner of 7th and Quincy. And again, it's a rental property, renting to a dentist, medical doctor, myself, dental laboratory. We don't expect this to benefit us. We already pay a lot of taxes. Over 40% of our income off the property goes directly to the county treasurer. We're taking another tax increase in April. Now we're going to have an increase on top of an increase. And I think we pay enough property taxes. It's a fine idea, but I think that you guys ought to figure out some other way to finance it besides property taxes on just a specific number of people. We take and target a group of just commercial property owners and their tenants in just this one area, and then collect tax from them and put it into this for basically just a few people downtown. I just think that if it's such a good thing for Rapid City, it should go to a vote of the people of Rapid City, number one. And then it should be financed over the whole population, not just by a few of us. Thank you.
Amanda Booman, South Dakota School Mine student. I look at your drawings and they're very nice, but I've been to that area and the drawings to me look like that space has quadrupled in size. Because I look at the skating rink and I think that skating rink is going to be a quarter the size of this room. and you're just going to be skating in little circles. You're going to fit maybe 10 people on a skating rink, and it looks very grand for what that space actually is. I was wondering what you're doing to expand that, because I know that parking garage isn't going anywhere, and I know like B&L Bagels and whatever else is in the Series building isn't going anywhere. You're not going to tear down part of that building, so where are you getting that extra space from in that picture?
Well, are you an engineer?
I am.
Well, that's obvious. I don't know. The architects put this together, and in the process of putting this together, they tried to make it be space realistic, you know, to do it. God only knows I can't comment on what you said, you know. I have no way of doing it, but, you know, we feel comfortable, I think, that the feel that you see there will be there. You know, the feel will be there, you know, whether that's the exact proportion of everything, that I don't know, you know, and that also, I might say, will be what happens if the city decides that this land can become available if other things happen, and we get the final architectural plans, you know, that really lay out this thing in specifics. But again, I really believe that the feel, and these things were drawn, I guess, more for a feel than critical engineering scrutiny, which I appreciate also.
My other question is the intention of this to bring a new crowd that's already living in Rapid City to actually come downtown to, I guess, check out what's there? Or is it to bring actual additional tourism to Rapid, and people are coming to Rapid just to see this plaza?
The people coming to Rapid just to see this plaza isn't even 1% of why we're doing it. We think that's what we call Lucky Strike Extra. The reason for this is to have downtown a place where people of all age groups want to come in the daytime and the evening and enjoy themselves. The kids, the parents, the grandparents. That's what it is, to make the downtown more vibrant than what it is in the daytime, and a broader cross-section of vibrancy in the nighttime. If that happens, other things will follow, and certainly the visitors will follow that. That's the whole focus of trying to create Main Street Square. Visitors were not part of it at all. I mentioned that to you only because that was the nucleus that got us start to thinking about it. You know, as they emphasize this plaza as being such a key cornerstone. But it's all for the community, and to make it better for the community. That also is why the management of it and the operation of it and the programming of it is so important. That's how those things happen, not by building it, but by operating it.
When you mentioned about the size of the ice skating rink, I can tell you right now, that's about the size of the ice skating rink in Rockefeller Center. That's how big it is. If you go to Rockefeller Center and you look at the number of people in Manhattan that fit in that rink downtown, it's about that size. And if you look at the layout, the perspective, because I stood here and stared at it wondering the same thing, and you look at it, you'll see that what Ray's saying is exactly it. When somebody talks to you about, oh, we went roller skating in Rockefeller Center, Manhattan, if you go down there, you'll see you got to wait in line to get in, because you know it's a long, you know, it's not a huge space, and quite frankly, ice skating isn't something that needs a lot of space. You know, yeah, that is what you do. You go around in circles. So on that point, now my wife and I have, probably 20,000 square feet under roof in the primary bid district downtown. And my initial assessments of what that's going to cost us, we own 2 buildings, about 1.5 acres. And what that's going to cost us versus what we're going to get in terms of property, or do we want our property values to go down? Is that, I mean, if that's, okay, no, you want your taxes to go down. That's a different issue than your property value. Because if you're a property owner, if you're a real estate investor, or a business person who owns real estate, you want your property value to go up. The tax assessment is a whole different issue. Now, this, in fact, is going to make your costs go up, and it acts like a tax. But the fact of the matter is, they're not asking this group to build the plaza. That is coming from private funds, right? And it's coming from matching city funds, which would be the entire city. The bid district is only to help operate, is that correct? And
Correct.
maintain it. So I think
Yes.
I came in here with the concept that we were being asked to buy it. No, 3 downtown people who have vested interest in downtown property are gonna put $3 million down on this. And the city, which means the entire city, is also gonna match those funds. Because I've been involved with these public-private things. We raised $15,000, $18,000 to change the paving in Art Alley. These things work. And so I think it needs to be explained, which is something that came to me tonight, that you're not asking us to build it. That's a whole separate project, and we all have a voice in that. We're just being asked to operate it. And I just don't think, when you, and I walk around, downtown all day. And half the time I get lazy and I drive from point to point downtown. So there's not many people here that can tell me too much about what it's like to live and work downtown, and because it's all I do. And this thing will be a huge boon, huge, to property values. Now, the property values and tax assessments have to be divorced from each other, because that's an issue that, you know, you have to take up with city council. We do a weird thing here in South Dakota. I don't understand it, in the way that you constantly escalate your valuations. Where I lived prior to here, you know, valuations are set across the board, and then there's a mill rate. And if they do a reassessment, they don't change the budget, okay? They go back out, they take all the property, they divide in the new mill rate, your taxes stay the same. Here, every time a value goes up, your taxes go up. That is absolutely that's a fundamental flaw in the way you do business here in South Dakota. It needs to change. It has nothing to do with this. So don't confuse the two. They're two different issues. And so, you know, I think, what are we gonna, I looked at it, Dan, it's like, for the amount that we're gonna benefit as property owners, and believe me, I have mixed use. We have just put a dance studio in, fixed rent for 5 years. So I got fixed costs there. We have fixed costs on all our lease, and we have mixed use. We're not just bars and restaurants, and we have a lot of different, type of property that is going to be, and including residential, which, yeah, there has to be some small increases in rent when property taxes go up. But I don't think that that's the central issue here. And if this is going to raise your assessment, then they need to lower the mill rate, you know? So anyway, that's all I got to say.
Is anybody for this?
Hi, I'm Rick Riley. I'm with Dakota Bank. I happen to be in Zone 2 out there, and we'll also be the capped tenants out there at the highest level. I think the idea of the town square is wonderful. I think that anything we can do in downtown Rapid to make it better, to entice more people to come down and spend more time there. If they spend more time, they'll be in more shops. But one of the things that I think that you have to do a better job of is you have to get and explain the dollars a little better. We talked about an escalating rate of some kind. What is that percentage, so we know? I think you have to do a better job of explaining how much money you raise or can raise per year, and then how that money is going to be spent, when it's going to start. Is it not start until the thing's completely done, and are we only paying for operating expenses? I think you need to do a better job for us to understand how our money's going, where it's going to go, how it's going to be raised, how much it can go up in the future. That's my financial background speaking. So I think that's something that everybody probably would like to know. I think the project's wonderful, but those other side of the questions have to be answered.
Sure. I'll try to readdress that because I agree with like Mary and Ray that, you know, nobody wants more taxes. And the issue is, to me, it's two different issues. One is, do I believe in the Main Street Square, and then how do we want to fund it? Whether we do a whole city or do we do it through a DID? And our whole negotiations was, if it was a DID, what would be the best way we could do it? And to answer your question, from what I understand, when you created an improvement district and you set caps at Zone 1 at $1.50 and Zone 2 at 75 cents, they cannot be raised without going through a complete referendum again, or the city council has to be approached. You cannot, that cannot be raised. So your taxes would be steady throughout the term based on your assessed value. Now, if your assessed value goes up, we don't have any control over that. We can't do anything about the assessed value.
But with the caps, but you're raising the cap.
No, the 75 cents and the $1.50 do not go up.
But what he's saying
But-
is, you know,
but
you're
the-
raising the $3,000.
But the $3,000, what would go up based on, from what we understand, normally on a year's basis, your assessed value will go up 3 to 5% a year, normally. So it would be written into the DID that on an annual basis, the cap would be raised 3 to 5% per year. Only the $3,000 cap. And the only reason would be is, let's say if somebody's paying $1,000 and the cap is paying $3, the next year if the person paying $1,000 goes up based on their assessed value, now they're paying $1,100, well, the cap should also go up the same percent. Did that make sense? I mean, it's just,
Explained, I'm not sure it makes sense to me. But
yeah, it's the only way we're trying to figure out the fairest way, so that all of a sudden somebody that's 1,000 doesn't keep creeping up towards. The cap has been a very big issue, because some people are saying, well, gee, why should I pay $1,000 where ABC building over here might pay $9,000, but they're only paying a cap at $3,000. So that's always been a major issue with us in Zone 2, is we didn't feel that we'd like to take the cap off. I mean, when I was negotiating, but in lieu of that, we felt the best way, the fairest way would be that because the 75 cents and the $1.50 is locked in, it cannot be changed. The only thing is the assessed value would be changed, which, you know, like we were saying, we don't want to see that go up, but so their fees would go up, so therefore the cap would go up accordingly to keep it consistent amongst all payers. Yeah.
With regard to the increase in the $3,000 cap, what I would suggest is that there be a number hard written into the ordinance that as of January 1st each year, it would increase 3%, 5%, whatever the number is that's ultimately proposed, so that everybody knows in advance exactly how much the cap can increase every year. That's something that you know, has to be written down as a part of the ordinance.
You look still worried, you know, so what else?
Well, I think what Jason said would make me feel a whole lot better if I knew going in that mine was going up 3% every year, rather than.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to beat anybody up, but I'm not going to rely on the assessor to find out whether my taxes are going up.
No, and
Unfortunately, those in the cap have the securest way
Because the cap people can only go up then 3% a year.
Why is there a cap?
The problem is, and I agree, is that those that are below the cap are more volatile because we don't know what the assessments are going to come out as. Okay, that's been a real struggle through this whole negotiation. I mean, just a second.
Well, why is there a cap?
well, that's a good question. You know, I think that when we looked tentatively at all the properties that are involved in this, that Mike we did some research, and then Mike did further thing. I think there are 15 properties that have a cap. When you look at the cap, you know, it's a controversial thing. You know, some people say how many square feet in the whole building. Some people say what's the gross income of the building. When we looked at the cap, we more or less took the fact that what we thought was fair was the frontage that a building had, you know, basically downtown, you know, or in this district, the frontage of it, you know, to do it. And it was a controversial thing, but we said, okay, it'll go up. We said $3,000 was the maximum that anybody should have to pay, you know, because what's going on downtown is really, you know, to try to make all of downtown it. Is that the right answer? You know, we thought it was, you know, to do it, but then Mike, when he came in, and he said, well, you know, the cap's a problem, but he said the problem is that, you know, we're going to have people under the cap that's going to go up every year, and the cap's not going to go up every year. And he said, is that fair? And we said, no, we really don't think that is fair. We said that we think the cap should go up every year too. So then we talked to Jason, and our first initial was that if the assessment rate goes up 10% a year, the cap should go up 10% a year, which is kind of what you were talking about, that you were not far. Jason says you can't do that. He said you can't have a variable for the cap. Don't ask me why. I mean, he explained it to me, but he'd have to explain it to you too, because I can't. And then we said, okay, well, how can we solve this problem? You know, how can we try to make it some equalizer? He said the only way that he perceived, which is just what he said, was that for the cap, you have some kind of a frozen percentage built in. And it was suggesting 3% or 5% or something like that. And that's how we came to it. The cap's controversial. You know, there are several things that came out of this compromise, if you want to call it that, that didn't satisfy everybody. You know, and in that process, we tried to come together with an overall solution that was basically fair and the right thing, realizing that it was not totally good for everybody, and probably nobody got exactly what they thought was the best thing in it. I mean, that's a reality. And when you talk somebody like Mary Renka, you know, and her thing, she's got a very legitimate concern. And you know, the only way I think that she could ever come up and say, you know, well, I really think this is a great thing, is if her motherhood side came prominent. You know, and I don't mean that in a bad way, Mary, but I mean that's the way, because if she looks strictly at her business and that thing, you know, what she says is right for her. I mean, and you know, but anyway, I probably didn't answer it the way you wanted, but I answered it the best I could, you know, for how it came about. Yeah, and that's all we can do. As Mike said, the one thing we want to be is transparent, to let you know honestly how we came about these things. You know, is it perfect? Probably not. You know, we spent lots of time lots of time talking about it. And it's not just me, but these other three gentlemen had an equal participation in it. You know, we happened to be the spokespeople because it started out us against them, and then it ended up us with us.
Well, that's the question I have, is why haven't these three over here said anything?
Why don't you ask them a question? Go ahead, ask them specifically a question, or anybody. Why don't you three make comments, please? Why don't you start with Don, with you?
I wasn't, my voice is not very good Swede, so that's why I'm not doing much talking, but the thing I have to tell you is I'm just like Mike. I started together with Mike on this. We were adamantly against it, but as we sat down with Ray and Dan, we could see that they were very open to negotiations. And so we tried to come up with, in our mind, what was the best vehicle, and we thought we were representing the outlying areas. We didn't think it was fair for those outlying areas. I came away from this whole process, as Mike said, we didn't get everything we wanted, but I felt really good about the negotiations. And I feel very good about the agreement we ended up with. Now, I fully understand that there's a certain amount of people out here that's not going to work. I'm just talking for myself. So.
Well, I kind of got started with this when I was the chairman of the Convention Visitors Bureau. And as Ray and Mike alluded to, hiring the Roger Brooks to come in and evaluate Rapid City as a visitor destination, and some things that could happen in Rapid City that would, we really thought, enhance the city. That moved along, and destinations started, and you know, the conversation started about the DID and some of those things. I feel very fortunate that I was invited to come to one of the meetings of people that weren't as enthusiastic, and got a chance to meet some of those folks, and coming away from that meeting, there was just a real it was very in my face almost that there was a tremendous amount of lack of information or wrong information out there. You know, in meeting with Mike and Don, Gene, and everyone else that we've touched base with, it was just it was real eye-opening for us. Even tonight, some of the folks that I have met with, there's still a tremendous amount of not so much misinformation, just information that hasn't been made available. I've had folks come up tonight and talk about, you know, why would I pay $3,000? I have this property, and the reality of it is that the assessment would probably be $300, but the information hasn't been there that it's, you know, that the idea that it was $3,000. Everything that Don and Mike and Ray, Jane, we talked about, certainly, it came down to one thing, and it was absolutely listening, gathering up that information, finding out what those questions were from every one of the areas, and then really trying to do our best to answer those things and do it just as fairly as we could. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you guys are tired of hearing some of us, because we've come around and we've talked to you about it, some of these things so much, but what we came up with is certainly nowhere near what we started with, and this really tastes a tremendous amount better, I think, to all of us than what that original plan was.
Hey, how about that? Well, when we first started out on this was totally unacceptable to me. I mean, there just wasn't anything about it. And there was a lot of things that we didn't completely understand. We were running on not the right information. We kind of jumped to conclusions and thought different things. I guess from our standpoint, it started with the parking issue. This group has nothing to do with the parking, but it just kind of opened up a can of worms, and a lot of things kind of hit at once. Tax increment finance districts and downtown improvement districts and Destination Rapid City and things like that. It's all been sorted out now. It's acceptable to me. I think that this group of people wants nothing but good for Rapid City. I have to be very careful personally. I'm one of the people that when they started building the Civic Center said, what are they going to do with that? Well, look at it now. What are they doing with that? When they built some of the retirement villages around, who is going to rent them? Well, they have waiting lists. So it's a good thing they didn't rely on people like me to be the visionaries for Rapid City. We wouldn't be going very far. If you remember 30 years ago when the Rushmore Mall opened up, it was just about you could fire a cannon down Main Street of Rapid City and not risk hitting anybody. And Rapid City's doing pretty well now, but we don't want to set back on our laurels and just see what happens. We have to take an active part and keep this thing moving forward. Is this the answer? Boy, I have no idea. Ask me in 5 years. My vision is very good looking back. Looking forward, it isn't so wonderful. But I really think it's on the right track, and we have to start someplace. We can't be doing a whole lot of projects at once. Let's get behind one project, let's make that work, and then let's go on to the next one. If we lose our focus, it will fail. That is for sure.
Is the city council behind this?
We have no idea of the city council's position on this.
I mean, the city council and the mayor are really the taxing authority.
They are. They have the final.
And that's my question.
We don't know if they're behind it or not. You will have to ask those people that question. And this will all come before them before it goes any farther. But for any of this to work, all these things have to be in place in the wings, if you will, waiting to go. And our understanding of this is if Main Street Square doesn't go, this downtown improvement district's not going to go, neither is Destination Rapid City. And of course, there's once all this goes, if it goes, we have to have a board in place on the downtown improvement district, and of course, like Ray and Mike said, 4 of those board members will be appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council 4 of those will come from Zone 2, 6 of those will come from Zone 1. That is based on how the dollars are paid in, kind of like a stockholder situation, I guess, in a company.
Who chooses the man? How does that work? You got that already, or?
From what I understand.
From what I understand, that would be one of the decisions of the board. Because they control the funds. They control all the operations of the Main Street Square, from what I understand. So they would make a decision of who would manage them, the Main Street Square. And at this point, that is not decided, that I know of.
And if you're gonna do that, like if you're gonna say, a certain percent that you're raising for the, like for the 3,000, like Jason, I think, said you had to do a certain percent each year. Why can't we have the same so we know what's going on? I mean, why do we, or are we locked in? We're locked in at our. But we
Yeah.
still have to do the assessment, right?
You're locked in at either 75 cents per thousand or $1.50 per thousand, depending on which zone you're in. That is locked in. The only thing that's not locked in, I wish we could have said, okay, year one, we freeze your assessed value so you know what your payments are, but I don't think we can do that. That would have been my ideal way. So the only thing we did is say, okay, the 75 and the $1.50 are locked. That cannot change. So if your assessed value in the first year is $300,000, the second year is $320,000, it would just go up basically 20 times 75 cents, about $15. We don't have any control. We don't have any control over that. You know, that's the assessed value. But we do the 75 cents and the $1.50.
But let me also say that as I understand it from Jason, that each year the DID board has to go to city council and say, here's the amount of funds we need, you know, and they have to approve it each year. And it's quite possible, and I would say certainly pretty much probable, that in the first years they won't ask for the full amount. You know, because as you start to evolve Main Street Square and the management of it, you got to take it in steps, because, you know, you first are getting it organized when it's being constructed, then you start to operate it. So it's quite possible that instead of asking for 148,000, they might ask for 100,000 or 75,000, and in that case, you know, everything goes down to that level. The thing is, it can't exceed what they get of that amount, but that doesn't mean that amount's automatic. You know, it's that amount or less. Is that right, Jason?
Yep. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I understand the city council voted not to increase property taxes.
I don't know. Who's here?
The city council voted not to take the CPI increase that's available to municipalities every year this year. So yes, that's true.
Does that mean that they can still go ahead and tax this small group of people? An increase?
Your property tax levy is something that's going to be separate from the special assessment that the improvement district is going to levy every year. So, you know, they're really separate entities, separate calculations.
No tax increase except for those people that did the bid district.
I'm sorry?
There'll be no tax increase except for the people in the bid district, is what you're telling me.
Well, ultimately, your property tax bill is composed of not only the city's portion, but also the county and the school districts. If you're in any other special districts, I would assume that everybody in Rapid City probably is not. So, you know, I can't speak to that. I think both the school board and the county commission have increased the amount of money they're taking.
I'd be curious to see a show of hands of people that are here that think that they already pay enough property taxes and that they don't want to pay extra taxes.
You're an American, that's a given. I do.
Well, my name is Hani Shafi with Dream Design, and we own 2 properties along Kansas City Street. And one of the properties is actually the one that we have our offices in it, and it houses other offices. It's about 30% vacant. And you probably know me from what you call the Rushmont, or whatever was called the Rushmont. And in the process of doing the Rushmont, or doing that project, 6 in St. Joe, I don't want to call it the Rushmont because that's what the architect chose for a name, which is what was not the name to be. You know, we were not planning to use that name. In the process of doing that, we actually bought the property next door to establish a rotation of the building and create a larger plaza than this, which unfortunately, due to politics and some of the unforeseen political situations, the project did not go through. In the process, we did also invest a lot of private funds, which is exactly $368,000 plus fractions, personal money, that we spent to study the area and invest that money to do a lot of evaluations. I think, you know, doing any project downtown is great for the whole community, not only for the downtown. Unfortunately, in the destination Rapid City, it got on the wrong foot from day one. You know, they tackled the parking issue, in which they said Kansas City Street has got to have meters, St. Joe and Main Street has to have no meters, and all of a sudden we split what they call the core downtown into 2 different classifications. Unfortunately, in the process of allocating the taxes, we're doing Kansas City Street the same as St. Joe and Main Street. And we're saying, well, because we got to collect parking fees so we could pay for the ramp, even though the ramp is actually utilized by a lot of the businesses, including a lot of the businesses in Kansas City Street. But in my case, actually, we have a parking lot in which we have most of our tenants lease the parking lot, and we lease whatever our employees need from the city. So we try not to park on the street. Unfortunately, our clients and the clients of those who lease from us, they park on the street. So I'm trying to say, it's like tax. If we have to have equal taxation, we have to have equal representation. And the 3 folks, you know, I really don't know you guys. You know, you guys mentioned negotiations. You know, you negotiated, and apparently at least 2 of you are in Zone 2. So you got something in that negotiations. My taxes will go up approximately to the cap right off the bat to $3,000 each property, which is approximately $6,000 a year. I don't think my tenants will afford. As a matter of fact, some of them actually we had to reduce their rent already. It's not really the nickel diming, it's just the principle. If you want to tax me like somebody else, I need to be represented like somebody else. If you folks, I mean, like Armadillo is approximately 3 blocks away from the plaza. Our office is approximately 2.5 blocks away. You know, to have Zone 2 and Zone 1, it's completely different. I think it is a good project for the community to have something like this. By the way, incidentally, when we were going to do a plaza and that one, actually we did not even discuss the details with the city because we were not given the opportunity to do so. We were going to build it actually with the private funding, including the tax increment district, without having to have any additional funding from the city. The maintenance of that was half privately and half by the city. Unfortunately, we were never given the chance to discuss that. And it's all because of politics, which is really not right. In this case, I think this project is good, you know, for the community, but we need to find a way to fund it as a community as a whole, not just a few individuals, because it will never succeed. Ray mentioned 5 years cap. You know, what happens after the 5 years? Is the city going to maintain the whole thing as a whole, or are we going to lose the $6.5 million and just scrap the whole thing? We can't just do that. You know, so we have to have a plan that is, you know, supported by the entire community. And I think it is a great project, don't take me wrong. I think it is needed. We need to do something downtown. And I hope that Brian Vulcan's project goes, because it is good for the community. You know, yeah, unfortunately Mike could not make it. You know, hopefully there will be another chance. But, you know, I support the project as a project, but I really don't support the way it is being funded. Thank you.
Gary Epperson, I'm a business owner downtown, and I agree here with the fact that this could be good for the community, but I don't feel that doing Zone 1, Zone 2 is the right way of doing it. If this is going to be good for the community, let's let the community be in on it.
I had a question
Secretary. Is it on special assessments? On special assessments, is it normal to cap them?
Special assessments are generally used for things like road improvements or recouping the costs cities incur in cleaning up nuisance properties. So the cap is usually not something that even comes into play. When you talk about a business improvement district, it's really a special arrangement. So I believe that a cap is something that has been used in other communities in a business improvement district. I don't think we're plowing new ground there.
And I wanted to comment on Ray's thing about the motherhood issue. You can look at that in a different way too. Do we want to saddle future generations with a continuing perpetual tax? And that's what you're going to end up with. Whether it's paid, this bid or the DID is for maintenance, and it's going to go on forever and ever and ever, amen. So motherhood works both ways.
Mike Stanley. I live downtown and work also downtown, so I spend a majority of my time downtown. And I will be probably someone that looks at a raised rent when it does happen. But I guess the question I had financially, I also support the project wholeheartedly. And I also know it all comes down to money and how we pay for things. And is there a way, instead of I guess a special assessment or a tax increase, is there a way that you could, I guess, reverse it and fund the project through a property tax decrease? Would there be any way that you could lower property taxes and use the lowered money to start to fund the project and attract more and more businesses downtown?
That's a question. I am fortunately, or fortunately, I'm not capable of answering that. I have no idea. You know, the only thing we tried to do was come up with how it could be funded, you know, that we thought maybe was, you know, made the most sense on an overall basis. But whether you can lower property taxes, build Main Street Square, and have more people come downtown, we'd be all for that. We'd be all for that 100%, but I think that's I don't know how you do it, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't. How you could do it.
Have you guys checked with any other towns that have done a project like this to see how they funded it?
Yes, we did.
I've been to Provo, Utah, which probably has the most beautiful main street in America. And I've been to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which has some of the most beautiful architecture in the country. Those are cities have done it. How did they do it?
I can't. I did not do that study, but we did do the study with people within Destination Rapid City, and in every case, the pattern we're following is the way it was happened. You know, that they improved. They started a downtown improvement district, you know, and those people had a board, and their thing was to work with the city to make these things happen. So it was a combination of private, city, and public funding that made it. But every one of them did. I know that's what happened in Billings. That's what happened in Sioux Falls. You know, those are two specifics that I know of that happened. I think we were told that happened in Fort Collins, you know, for what happened in the downtown there. But this is not new ground by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty much the typical way. And you have to realize that the DID board, you know, they control how these funds are used to work with the city to make things happen. And, you know, anyway, but definitely this is not new ground. I mean, it's I would say, from my understanding of it, and I caution you on that, this is very typical.
We, as most of you know, in Rapid City, probably 3 years ago, they started a business improvement district that encompassed the hotels in Rapid City that have more than 50 rooms per property, and it was very much the same process. Talk to the property owners, talk to the people that it was going to affect, and very much we met at that time, and the people that really worked on it, many of the same topics came up. we're not in a position to do this. It's going to hurt us. It's going to, and those were absolutely valid, absolutely valid. But through compromise and everything else, the business improvement district through the hotel tax did get into place, and basically what that was a $2 a night for occupied rooms. It ended up raising the first full year about $1.2 million. The people that participate in that bid, many of those people who were very wary about the process, have since that time come back and said, that was, for us, it probably saved a lot of that for the downturn in the economy, and they're coming back now and going, how do we expand this? What can we do just for the marketing dollars? You absolutely are. But when you take even like a city like Billings, and I'm sure most people have been there, hopefully you visited that city since they have implemented their downtown business improvement district. Very much the same story. They started with an area of Billings, and it has grown with just absolutely wonderful success. The people that bordered that bid area in Billings, it's a bid, now are campaigning, how do you expand this? How do we get to be part of that? And to address what you said, it was very much following that standard, and certainly have spent a lot of time, the folks at Destination have spent a lot of time with the folks from Boise, Idaho, and Billings, and Sioux Falls, and some of those places that have had very, very successful bids. And with it came not just the things that we've talked about tonight, but things like, there's a million topics to talk about. Vagrancy, how do you address that? And what does that mean? And those were all things that those business improvement districts, same conversation that you would have in Rapid City. How do you address that? And how do you ensure that that's that's addressed going into it rather than on the backside of it? So there has been a lot of talk.
Sorry, Tony Marshall. I'm a property owner in Zone 2, and this deal's relatively new to me. And frankly, I love the concept. But similar to the School of Mines student's question, the property seems rather small relative to the price tag. I see ice and I see grass and I see concrete. Sell me the sizzle on this thing. What's $6.5 million? Thank you.
I guess I should answer that. You wanted to know what's involved in the $6.5 million?
Yeah, the $6.5 million is strictly for this lot.
No, the $6.5 million is for the construction of the entire project. And it's broken down. I don't have those figures with me right now, but I just don't have them with me right now, but it's broken down by general category as to what it goes in. The architects have, assured us as much as they can assure us that it won't exceed that and that it probably should be less than that. They've assured us that this is an excellent time to do it because people are looking for the construction jobs. And then the final real meat and potatoes things on analyzing where the costs are will be when they finalize the construction plans. The architects really draw up the construction plans. I wish I had brought that with me, but I don't. But there's a general category of things as to where that money is. As an example, an expensive thing I know is the fountain. Because that's got to have a water containing system to it and that sort of a thing. The ice skating rink isn't as expensive as what you think it might be, on first impulse, because it's something that's put in and taken out, to do it. And those things can even be rented from people that do that. But that's the biggest, as I remember it. But please.
It's going into this footprint right here. It's going into this section right here. This is the 6.5.
Yeah, that's the $6.5 million.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And you ultimately have a breakdown of that.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got a generic breakdown right now by general category, from the architects. And, I'm sure that'll be presented to the council and that sort of a thing, to do it. And I happen to have that. I just don't have it with me,
You don't happen to know what the architect's fees are then?
The architect fees are going to be paid 100% with no city funds. They're going to be paid with private donations, to do it. So the city will have no expense there. That will not come out of the the DID assessment or anything else. It's a totally separate funding effort.
My main objection here is that you're collecting a tax from a specific group of people, that is, property owners and their tenants. And the tax is primarily going to be to improve retail business downtown. That doesn't seem fair to me. No.
I disagree with that. But go ahead.
My name is Eric Kikis. I live just around the corner on 7th and St. Joe. I also work downtown. I'm one of the members of the design team on this project. I want to voice my support for the project, of course. But I'd also like to give a testimonial to some of the discussion about places like Billings, where I've spent the last 3 years. And if anybody's familiar with the revitalization that happened in Billings, that was a very rough area downtown about 10 years ago. And it's now quite a nice area downtown. What was interjected into the city of Billings through some business improvement monies was people and commerce. People weren't scared in driving by in their cars anymore in these zones. They were actually excited to get out, give their money to businesses, to shop, to kind of reoccupy a downtown core. Rapid City is light years ahead of many cities, and in fact is light years ahead of Billings in many reasons, because people downtown care. People downtown want to stimulate their business, and they also want to see people come in and shop in their businesses. The one thing that's very evident about this project, which I'm just going to throw this up for everyone's thoughts, is because of the nature of this project, it's actually, there will be a use agreement potentially in place, but it's not somebody else's private property that we're spending money on to improve. It is actually a people place, and it's really owned by the taxpayers of the area. Destination Rapid City is doing mothering and stewardship to try to catalyze through their payment of design and generation of some monies in the neighborhood to try to create a destination, a signature. It's actually considered like a courtyard or a city square. That's a very effective tool for creating a sense of identity for a city. So be it what it may, you all eventually will be owners of this facility through the fact that will be public land and partially public funded. So it's not just, I just don't want to make it clear that we've alienated anyone, because it's not actually somebody else's property you're improving, it's your property. So with that, I'll shut up.
Are we going to provide the police department and stuff like that for that? Because you're going to be managing it, so is the DID going to be paying for security and law enforcement down there? Or is the city going to handle it? And the other thing is, some of these other DIDs who have done this, they have had security of their own and then had lawsuits against them for discrimination.
This thing on. Vacancy and security are very key issues that have to be addressed in the management of it. How exactly that's going to be done, I mean, we really don't know at this time, except that there are several things that have to happen. Vagrancy has to be controlled. It's got to be a clean place. It's got to be a safe place, and the restrooms have to be monitored and kept in constant state of cleanliness and not used by people that shouldn't be there for anything other than what they're meant to. That's right up at the top, I think, of what the DID board will want to be sure that anybody that manages it sees that it occurs. How city gets involved with that, I'm not sure. The liability question, I mean, that's a pretty broad-based question, but I think a lot of cities have been familiar with that, and we raised that with Jason here, you know, and I'm sure that'll be covered in whatever happens. But the same concerns you have, the same concerns I think that anybody that's going to manage this has, and I'm sure the DID board will have that. See to it that has to happen.
I was part of the original meetings. I've been to at least 6 of the meetings with Mike and Jean and Don. I think your idea is phenomenal. I really do. It's a beautiful plan for Rapid City. I don't think you would be meeting any opposition to this, but for the one fact you're just trying to get tax dollars from one group of people. None of us would be here tonight at all if we weren't being singled out. I don't know how much all of you guys have paid attention to your when you get your property taxes and what you pay. I think I pay maybe $70, $80 a year for the library, and probably that much for the fairgrounds. I can't understand for the life of me why, if this is for, as this gentleman said here, the city, all of Rapid City owns this, then why isn't all of Rapid City being asked to contribute? That's why we're here. Thank you. I'm serious. Your vision is incredible. We've all talked about it. We don't have the vision you have. And so I would like to thank you for that. We all want to see Rapid City and downtown grow. There's certain areas I'm not sure how well you could really benefit, I guess, by doing some of them. But again, I'll cut it short. If you could make this where everyone paid and no one was singled out, I believe that's why this all went down in 1990. It went to a vote of the people. Am I correct on that? Yeah, I thought it was 1990. This was tried before, and it ended up going to a vote of the people, and it did fail because nobody wanted it. But could you find out if all of Rapid City would mind having a $50 levy on their taxes or something, and then collecting that money? Another thing is I also thought that if any taxes were collected, that it had to be maybe an elected official that was responsible for taxes. I didn't know private places could collect tax dollars. And then there was one more thing. I'll probably think of it later, sorry. Oh, I do have one other issue. I guess I do not feel that any mayor should appoint people. And I found that out when I found out who was on TIF boards. I think if this goes through, then the downtown, or whoever's most affected, if this DID goes through, that I think all the downtown businesses are asked to contribute to this should be the ones that either elect somebody or nominate somebody, or somebody can run for a position. I don't think that it should be one person appointing certain people, because there's too many of us in too many different areas of, whether it's restaurant, dentist, psychiatry, paint, anything. There's too many different people represented here, and I think it should be voted on between everyone in it. Thank you.
Before you do that, real quick before you do that, of course, to let everybody know, the core people that were involved in the beginning, of course, was Julie and the 3 of us up here, and Charlie and Gwen and Mary, Bruce over in the corner, I think. And all of us, any time that we ever left a meeting, just to make sure everybody understands, we went back to the core people and we said, okay, here's where we're at. Should we continue proceeding on? And we felt trying to do the best option for a tax district, if that was going to be forced upon us, that we could get for and I got to say, I am prejudiced to Zone 2 because that's really who I was representing, and that's why I was involved in this. And one of the key things in all of our negotiations was we said we want the board to be elected by the people within each zone. We agree with you 100%. Ray agreed with it 100%. In fact, we had it all set. That's the way we were going to be doing it. And then we had a meeting with Jason, and he kind of, we'll let him take over from there.
State law is very specific on how the board is appointed for an improvement district like this. It requires that, it depends on your form of government, but in the aldermanic form, those appointments are made by the mayor with the consent and approval of the council. There's no wiggle room on that. That's what state law requires. That's a private organization. That's not a governmentally created body.
And DID is now would be a governmental thing?
Yes, this is a board that will be created by ordinance of the city of Rapid City. It's the city that will actually collect the money. It will be deposited into a fund maintained by the city finance officer. The board will simply oversee the expenditure and the usages of those funds, and it has to be consistent with the purposes of the improvement district.
I want to recognize the young lady who's studying engineering. She's doing a fine job. As an engineer, facilities engineer, the fees on this at 8% would be $500,000, roughly. If you wanted to know the dollar amount, that's just a guess for this scope of a project. What I have question of is how is the $148,000 arrived at? Is that the operations and maintenance cost at 25 cents a square foot for sod to be put in each season? The portable utility plant for the refrigeration of the ice. That's probably an underground facility, so it doesn't cause irritant for sound and visual obstruction. I could see this thing hitting $6.5 million, but is $148,000 the number that was arrived at by the zoning and the assessment, or was that an actual cost that was derived by the facility itself?
Turn this thing on. That was arrived at by, we did a study of the 2007 assessment rates. And then we did a study of all the property owners within that district. And then we did at a zone 1 and zone 2 and came up and said if it was at 75% and if it was at $1.50, you know, it would raise about $148,000. Now you have to understand that the amount of money that's going to be spent on this will not be, you know, the DID board will turn in a budget to the city and the city will do it. As we said, it won't be, it would be $148,000 or less. A lot of the things you talked about are actually construction costs. You know, this particular, the DID board will find out how they want to have it managed, and the management of it will be oversee the operations, pay those expenses, you know, whatever they might be, like hiring a manager and doing that sort of a thing, and then also programming it, you know, so that they have programs, some of them which will be money-making programs, and some of them which will be for the city, you know, like Christmas concerts or things of that nature. We don't know what all of those things are yet. Those have to all be, you know, decided. But the $148,000 was decided by taking 75 cents and $1.50 going by the 2007 assessments, and as best we could come up with an estimate of how it was. Yeah, go ahead, I can hear you anyway.
Just a follow-up, is that $148,000 sufficient then to cover the utility costs, the security, the garbage pickup, the cleaning of restrooms? Is that part and parcel of cooperating with the city that you submit a budget to the city council, say, please help us, or do they take it in perpetuity after a 5-year sunset?
No, you're right. We don't know. We think so, but we don't know, because once we start to get into how it's going to be managed and how it's going to be operated, then we'll get into the concrete specifics of what amount of money that's going to take. And that also is why, you know, initially, you know, we're not going to need that amount of money, you know, because initially you're going to start to put the plans together and start to figure it out. And then the second thing that's going to happen, I'm sure, is that if there isn't enough money in there, you know, can you cut things back? This is the DID board, you know, are there other ways to raise additional funds? We don't have those answers yet, you know, to do that. We really don't know. Those things have to evolve, you know, as we start to evolve this project, if it's going to be a project. You know, that's the first decision that's going to be made. Please? Please?
Start coming up with these numbers. And then sit there and say, well, we're not sure how much it's going to cost. We'll figure that out later. And we need to be figuring it out now before I'm going to vote for this thing.
Well, I appreciate that. Yes?
Are you totally opposed to trying to get a levy on all of our taxes? Would that be something you would be open to?
Well, you know, Julie, we tried very hard to figure out how this was done in a typical city like Billings, you know, and that was our first emphasis on it. And the thing that they all found was that if you can get a group of people that are in the area that's really involved, that you want to improve, and if those people can put their heart, you know, behind all of this, that's the best way to make it happen. Your concept about this is good for the community. Why shouldn't all the community pay for it? You know, that's a great concept, you know, but that's not the way it's typically done. And, you know, I think that the way we're presenting it is the most logical way to do it. But go ahead. I mean, but that doesn't mean that your way isn't a good way.
No, that's not my, I think it's the way a lot of us are feeling, and to achieve this goal that you have for Rapid City, which is phenomenal, perhaps the best way to achieve that goal would be to ask all of Rapid City, or make all of Rapid City, if somebody wants to have us all, but like I say, I'm forced to pay for the Central States Fair, which I think should be able to operate on their own without my money, and the library. So why in the world wouldn't all of Rapid City be more apt to help fund a project where they could go down and take their family? You said it'd be a family thing, ice skating or out to something. If they could get something for it, if each family went down there 5 times, it'd be $10 a time, which you really wouldn't pay, but you'd be paying it for your property taxes. You know, why wouldn't they be willing to do that? And then your goal to achieve.
Yeah, I can't really answer that question. Jim.
Is there anything you could do to help?
No, you know, we're going to go with this project, you know, with this proposal. Now, you know, the group of us here said, you know, this is really, we did a lot of give or take. This thing can be changed, you know, if people don't want it, the city council will turn it down, you know, if they really feel that's the heart and soul of it. And then that's it. You know, it's just that simple, you know, to do it. That's why I say I think this project, now somebody else could resurrect it and say, well, let's make it a citywide funding thing. You know, that's good. That ain't going to be us. You know, that can be somebody else, you know, and we would probably definitely support that, you know, to do it. But if you want Main Street to be a square, after all the discussions we had and all the give and take, you know, if you really think that's a good thing, then, you know, this should happen, you know, we hope it would happen the way we're proposing it, because we're willing to support it right up to the hill. But if you don't want it that way, then change it, you know, and there's no, you know, there's no animosity if that's the way it ends up. You know, we feel we did the very best we can do, Julie, you know, and honestly approach this as open-minded and transparent as we could be. If that's not what the people want, if that's not what the council wants, we're willing to accept that and all the time and effort we put in. We know we did what we thought was right, you know, and if it's wrong in the majority of the people, then it's wrong. We think Main Street Square is a great thing, and we think that this is the way it should go. So that's the way we approach it, you know, and to say we're right, no. You know, nobody can tell anybody else how to think. I'm not going to tell you how to think, you know, and you have great trouble telling me how to think. You got to follow what's in your own mind and then live that out and then follow it to the thing. And I respect that. I mean, I respect that totally. And God knows we don't think we know all the answers. We don't. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're wrong.
Let the engineer speak.
Okay.
I have been listening to all this, and I just got involved recently, and I see your point of view with foot traffic and taxes, but as a non-business owner, from my point of view, you're talking about the 5-year plan, and at the end of that it goes kaput if it doesn't work how you want it. But you want this to generate foot traffic downtown and therefore generate more revenue for some of the businesses. I understand, you know, some of you aren't going to see that. There's, you know, laundry. You're not going to walk in with the shirt off your back saying you need it dry cleaned. You know, you're not going to have that kind of foot traffic. But maybe somebody will see your business, oh, there's a psychiatry practice there. I didn't know that, you know. They could recommend to a friend, oh, I saw this one downtown. I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but my parents live in Sioux Falls, and I go back to visit, and there's lots of businesses downtown that, unless I was walking down for the art walk or whatever, I would never know they were there. And you go in and you see, oh, that's really neat. And if it wasn't for that, I never would have noticed some of those businesses. But on the flip side of that, you want the, I guess, community to be taxed instead of the businesses. But I think, from my point of view, that because this is a plan to generate revenue for more of the businesses downtown, they should be the ones with the initial funding to get it started. And then at the end of that 5 years, if yes, it's working, or no, it's not working, then the community and the city takes over. Because then it's kind of, you know, it's there. You can't just tear it down. That's $6.5 million. To me, that's just ridiculous. You can't just let it get run down and go to waste, because then you're going to end up having to redo everything and spend another $6.5 million to do some kind of improvement to get rid of this waste and deterioration that's happening because of what you built. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that I think the initial cost should come from the people who it's affecting the most. Because if it's trying to get foot traffic and things, you should be the ones, I'm sorry to be the devil's advocate, but you're the ones who should probably pay for it. And then after that 5 years, whether or not it works, then the community takes over with their tax. And that's maybe where the DID, just maintains the management perspective and maybe goes to bed as far as a community standpoint, making sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to do, but they just kind of are secondary in comparison to other things. Just my 2 cents.
My question is how many businesses are going to end up moving out because the extra cost that they're going to incur because they can't afford to have that and they don't get the foot traffic that they thought they're talking about. There's a lot of businesses that are not dealing with foot traffic in this area.
I guess I looked through this. Go ahead.
I hear talk about the Destination Rapid City and that they're going to contribute funds to this. And I'm curious as to where Destination Rapid City gets their funds from.
Damn thing on. First of all, I want to clarify something that Hanny said. Destination Rapid City had absolutely nothing to do with the parking thing. I mean, we got the rap on that. It just so happens that John Brewer works for Destination Rapid City and he also was on that board. But that was not our project. Destination Rapid City gets its fund from several sources. The first source is there's some private donations that come into it to do it. The second source is we get $100,000 from the city, that they just started to pay us, that is to operate the things that we want to do downtown. The third thing that it comes from is we get money from our memberships of Destination Rapid City. And the fourth thing is that we get money from the Downtown Association, but the one paid, there's John Brewer and a young lady, and that young lady spends 75% of her time working for the Downtown Association, so they subsidize her. But that's where the money comes from right now, to do it. And you look like you got concerns about that, so tell me what they are.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I was going to have a comment for the city attorney there that he says you can't do something, and I say that there is no such thing as can until it comes to the taxpayers. He can tell us that we can't, but we can't tell him that he can't. And that's not just for the city attorney. That goes all the way up to the top. So the taxpayers can't, but I say there's no such thing as can't. And I was kind of wondering about, as far as the, we've talked about the sunset thing, and I was in on part of that sunset deal, and what we were doing with the sunset, the way I understood it is if it was working, it was going to sunset at 5 years, period. But at 5 years, if it's working very well, then we're all going to vote on it to keep it. And if it ain't working, well, we're just going to let it go bye-bye. So, that's not going to push any extra money onto the taxpayers of the city. If it's working for everybody and everybody likes it and they vote it back, vote to hang on to it. It is, now there's some properties that are mostly in Zone 2 that are vacant. Has there been any consideration for these properties that are vacant because they don't have any income coming in? There's just somebody that owns the property, and yeah, they've been trying to have somebody rent it, but it hasn't happened. Is any comments on that?
What this does, but yeah, I got a comment, and it's just a personal opinion, but it's that if we make what we call the Zone 1 and Zone 2, or the city center, more vibrant, and we bring, and that results in more people coming down here, and if that results in more businesses wanting to be located down here, and that's got to be our long-term goal. then you got to figure out, well, where are those businesses going to locate, or where are those people going to live, and who's going to build those facilities, or what type of vacant property can be converted to satisfy those needs. You know, that's all in what I would consider to be the vision that we're leading towards, that it feeds on itself. So this whole city center area, you know, that goes from the city center and it includes all the way down to the campus of the school mines, is so vibrant, you know, that the property downtown is a premium property, so to speak, for renters, you know, rather than, you know, why do you want to be there type thing. Now that's, you know, that's my opinion, you know, and that's worth no more than my opinion. But that's the way it goes down. You know, I think each property owner has to look at his own property, and I mention again, you can't tell other people how to think. So each property owner has to look at it and say, you know, is this going to mean anything to me 5 years from now? Is it going to be bad? Could be. You know, if it all does is increase taxes, is it going to be good, or is it not going to be anything? I mean, I can't answer that question for you. You know, I think on an overall basis, there's going to be a lot of good for a lot of people, and I think in general the whole zone. That's what I believe. I'm party of one. Yeah.
I suffer from that too, Ray, and it's the rose-colored glasses syndrome where, you know, would downtown Rapid City be more enjoyable to every person in this room if there were 10 more restaurants? You know, would it? Would you enjoy coming downtown as a local person if you had that many more options of places to dine? Or would you come downtown and would you enjoy the Rapid City experience as a citizen here if there were 15 more specialty shopping places, or if you had more options for entertainment in the evening? Would you come from Gillette or Belle Fourche and go to a tire and muffler place where you knew you could drop off your car and get 4 new tires put on if you knew that you could spend the next 2 or 3 hours walking around downtown and be entertained? I don't have the answer to that, because I don't know where Rapid City will be in 5 years. I would love to think Rapid City is going to be one giant step forward of where it is now, and we can do that and draw on those things. That's how I envision, and why Main Street Market and this did is important. What would that do to a paint store? Well, I think just like this young lady said, if she's downtown walking around, or if she's any place walking around for another 2 or 3 hours, and you go to a place you didn't even know was there, it can't hurt our businesses. We talk about empty storefronts. Isn't that the thing that fills them up? You know, I mean, isn't it that success that fills them up, is to bring people into an area and have the opportunity for those people to spend time in that core? And I do not have the answer. I wish like heck I had a crystal ball and said, in 3 years this is what's going to happen. That your buildings you're going to actually have people waiting in line to rent your space from West Boulevard to East Boulevard, from Omaha to South Street. I wish like heck I could say every single place is going to be filled up. But you know, folks, we got some good things happening. That lab, the potential, you know, none of us know what it's going to bring. But, you know, that empty building, and there's some spring or there's some widget that needs to be made to help that lab operate. It may be built on the corner of First Street. That might be the new home for that. I can't say it is, but through my rose-colored glasses, that's how I look at this thing, and why that's important for the future of downtown.
Okay. Well, we've heard a lot tonight, and I'd like to put my 2 cents worth in if I could. This is a report that I've found, just the research I did today for the future of business improvement districts. And it's a report that was made by Price Waterhouse, and it was prepared for the U.S. government. And if I can read just a couple paragraphs here, if you'll just indulge me for a second. It says that bids have become an integral part of municipalities across the country. They're engaged in a diverse set of programs and projects and seem to be doing very well. It is obvious when walking around these districts that most of them are more visually appealing. They are no longer plagued by trash and grime, garnished facades, deteriorated sidewalks, run-down parks. There is a sense that the commercial center of these small and medium-sized communities have come back to life. But clearly, something is amiss. It says America remains a nation largely dominated by shopping malls, strip malls, suburban lifestyle, and the automobile. Even on the revived streets of these small towns, there is no comparison to the deluge of activity in the Walmart located at a distant bypass highway. In the downtown areas of these cities, storefronts are still being boarded up as retailers continue to relocate to shopping malls on the outskirts of town. And while the commercial sidewalks of these cities may be teeming during the workdays, in the evenings and weekends, they are all too often empty. And I thought about that for a second, and I thought, you know, that's exactly what's happening in Rapid City. Our city planning and zoning is concentrating all its efforts along the I-90 corridor. All the beautiful new malls and shopping areas along this route, they're obvious, and no one here is going to deny that they're not. This city gave Cabela's an unbelievable incentive package to locate their store here in Rapid City. With that in mind, why is the city not looking for incentives to bring businesses into the downtown area and not create an unfair tax on a few individuals and a few businesses that are already there? And as it goes back to like everyone has said, why has something not as simple as a sales tax been discussed as an option? Let the people of Rapid City to decide this. It should be more for the people of Rapid City than just a few people that have drawn a line around a couple blocks. So why should the few businesses that are downtown be expected to pay for all of this if the whole community is going to enjoy this? The whole community should be the ones that pay for it. And that's just echoed through, I think, everybody in this room. And that's about all I have to say. Thanks.
I have a question for the city attorney again, if I may. I'm not sure of the process, but if this was to go forward and reach the point where it was presented to the city council and the city council, it could be referred, as I understand. That would be my first question. Can it be referred?
Once city council, let me just describe the process, and I'll answer the question at the end.
Sure.
What happens under the process that I understand is in motion right now is that a petition will be presented to the council that says, City Council, please create this business improvement district. That's the legal term for the DID. Once that happens, then every property owner within the proposed district gets notice of a public hearing. They've got to get at least 30 days notice, so that takes some time. City Council conducts the public hearing, and if a majority of the property owners do not object to the creation of the district, then the council has the legal ability to, in fact, move forward with the district. In order to do so, they're required to adopt an ordinance to implement the district. That takes 2 readings. Generally, that happens over the course of a month. Once second reading is approved and published, then there's a 20-day window when referral petitions could be presented, could be circulated in the community. The voters in the community could sign the petition and refer it to a public vote. So the answer to your question is yes, it could be referred.
And if it were referred, then everyone in the city would have an opportunity to vote for or against it.
Those who are registered to vote in the city of Rapid City could vote on that, yes.
Yeah. And that's the problem that I have with this, is this core group is trying to create this DID, or whatever it's called, and it's sort of like annexation. There's a core group that's going to benefit from it, and then if you try to refer it, then the whole city has an opportunity to vote either for or against it. Now, I understand that's just the process, but you can kind of see what my thought is that if the whole city can vote against it or for it, then the whole city ought to be paying for it.
Yes.
My name is Richard Hoff. I've been around here quite a while. I have a property downtown, a small one, but it's functioning. I was here 20 years ago when we went to this last bid dance. Excuse me. And I love the concept. I just really like what you're all trying to do. And I want to go back in the history of this thing a little bit. The last idea was not bad. It wasn't as good as this one. But it failed because of the inequities and of the tax, the unfairness. Now let's just say I have a little hotel out here. I have 2 floors, and they're worth $1 million a floor. I would pay the maximum tax. I would go up to the cap. My neighbor has a 10-story hotel. He would cap, and it's also worth $1 million a floor. My neighbor would be capped on his 2 floors, just like my 2 floors. But my neighbor would have 8 floors of hotel to compete with me for free, no tax. That's what the cap does. It's so terribly unfair. Now this lady over here has a little office space downtown that's worth $50,000. She pays the max or the minimum tax, which is probably 3 times what her property would be worth. It's unfair. And if you're unfair, the American people don't like unfairness. I don't like it. You don't like it. At least you think you don't like it until somebody is unfair to you. Then you're going to like unfair much better. So much as I'd like to see this go ahead, and I'll gladly pay my tax, but it was defeated 20 years ago because of the unfairness. And I told that to Master John Brewer, and John Brewer said, "Who's going to stop us?" And a good citizen stood up and said, "I will." And they did. So let's go on with this, but let's make it fair.
Do you want to do the last comment before I close here?
I had a question.
Okay.
You know, I know when they tried to do the first bid and they came by and told us what they were going to do, they had a petition for all of us to sign.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know, I actually signed that one, so.
Julie.
In favor of it, so. What my question is, you know, you've done negotiating, you've negotiated for us. Maybe not got everything I wanted, but you guys did a pretty good job. Are you going to take, and I don't know how many business owners there are in the district, whether it be 200 or 225, but are you going to take a straw poll from all of us so that when you go to the city council, you can say, I got a 75% support? Not that's the reason they did the last petition, or so I was told, because truthfully, nobody has come and talked to me either before the first one or before the second one when you did your negotiations, and I'm one of the 15 that's paying the max. And nobody's come and talked to me. And I did talk to the first group and let them know some of the things I didn't like. So you're going to take that straw poll so when you go to the city council, you can tell them how much support you really have?
First of all, we invited the city council here tonight simply because we wanted them to hear what you guys are, what everybody in the district feels. I don't want to go to City Hall and say, this is what, I'm not going to speak for everybody but myself, because that happened on the parking meters, and we were a little upset about that. So that's why we did this tonight, and we wanted everybody to be here to state your feelings, so that, number one, we could all hear what's going on, because I only talked to the original core people because it would be pretty hard to call 100 people every time we'd have a meeting to try to review, and I felt the pulse from them was probably representative of how everybody felt. But when we did the negotiations, I told Ray, I said that if the core felt it was worthwhile to go to the next step, we wanted to have a meeting of everybody here so everybody could talk and make their feelings known, because that was not done before. And I think we accomplished that tonight, and I think the city council members heard it. But to me, it'll boil down to it. I so much appreciate what Julie, because that was the original thing we felt in the core. It should be a citywide tax. It boils down to number one, if we believe the Main Street Square is positive, I mean, that's the first thing I would really like to, I want to get a feeling from everybody. And if that's positive, then we need to make sure we pay for it the right way. If there's going to be a tax involved, it's got to be fair and it's got to be right. And I know Ray said we agreed that, you get to a point when you're negotiating, you got to either fish or cut bait. There's a time we got to make a decision and go. And we felt if we were going to do a tax increment district, the way we came up with it, probably the best way to go. But the Main Street Square, to me, Main Street Square is the most important thing. I mean, I really like it. And if that means we might have to change and go with a different avenue for taxing, maybe we have to. I don't want to throw the Main Street Square out because we're approaching it wrong. I know I haven't talked to anybody in the group back here, and maybe, that's not the way I should be doing it, but I feel that way too. And I think if I'm getting it correct, I think everybody here really likes the concept of the Main Street Square, because you hit it right on the nose that if we don't do something, we're going to lose everything to the malls and to the highways, and we're going to wake up in 10 years downtown and our little shops are going to have vacant lots all around them. We don't want that. And is the Main Street Square the proper way to get to that next step? Is this the catapult to get us there? And that's what got me on board. And I felt I'll pay the fees that our shop would pay because I really like the Main Street Square. But if that's not the proper way to get to it, we need to know that. The city council needs to know that, because Ray said, and he was so honest, he said, we will not do this if it hurts the businesses downtown. And I believed him, and I still believe him. So that's what I think we're hearing you tonight, and that's why I didn't want Julie to leave yet, because you're exactly right. I mean, we've got to look at those things, and I don't even know if we can even do anything different than what we're doing. I mean, those are the things we're fighting with. I mean, Jason might say you can't do that so the Main Street Square goes out. I don't know.
But Ray also said that it seemed like that wasn't an option for you guys, and I just don't understand why that couldn't be an option. To the city project. I mean, why would we have to give up all this green? Because does everybody like this? We all like it. Ray, he's come up with a phenomenal thing. We just the only obstacle.
Yeah. And I think everybody agrees, no matter what happens, you got to appreciate what Ray did. I mean, and everybody is saying that, to take this on. I know it's wonderful, and it's great, and it can't hurt us. That's the nice thing. But we got to figure out the best way to get there, and we thought the best way, the most efficient way, was through the DID. As we negotiate it down, not the first one. Why don't you just ask the people? That's what we're doing. Just bring it to a vote. Okay. We did that on Cabell. Let's bring them in. People voted it in. People voted for that event. The ice skating ring, yeah. The Journey Museum. Why don't you just ask the people? Okay.
It
That's.
shouldn't be a small print. And I don't think Ray should give up all the hard work he's done.
Absolutely. I agree.
Of this, he's put in too much time and money and effort to benefit, Rapid City.
Yep. Well, and I agree. And this attests, we've been here over 2 hours, and it's wonderful. I don't care if we're here till midnight, because this is what we needed to hear, didn't we? When we all talked in the beginning, we wanted to talk. We wanted to have a dialogue, and that's what this was about. So before I leave, thanks.
Let me just make a couple of closing comments, too. This is an array project. I mean, I don't want you in any way to think about that, because that's not at all what it is. I maybe have just a little bit different feeling on this than Mike does at this stage. I feel like we've really gone through a heck of a process to come up with what we thought was the best compromise to make this thing happen, and there are 3 elements due to the city: what Destination Rapid City has to do and what the DID has to do. There probably is, and maybe is, another way to do it. I'm going to go with this. If this doesn't happen, that's fine with me. I know my heart was in it, and I know that our group had the best interest of what's right for this whole community to do it. But this is the way I'm going to go with it. If the city council doesn't want to take it this way, that's fine with me. I'll have absolutely no regrets, but then I back off, to do it. Me backing off doesn't mean it doesn't happen either, because it can still have the same momentum to do it. But we went through too much to try to answer every question to the satisfaction of every person. And I know what you're saying, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all. The people that had the major concerns for this were the people that came here tonight, and that's what we wanted to hear. There's another group of people that weren't here tonight, that maybe have a little bit different outlook on this, that are also involved in this. And when the council finally considers it, there will be all elements there. Those that have the concerns, those that don't have the concerns, and those are in the middle. And we'll just see where those cards fall. That's what the council's here for. And if they fall, that what we're proposing isn't right, and they want to do it another way, absolutely that's the right thing to do. But I too want to really thank you all for coming here. It was a good discussion. I don't think anybody, I take every comment that was made here as a positive comment that came from the heart of the people involved. And I appreciate that. There was no animosity here on any side, and I laud you for that. And we hear you. We might be wrong. If we're wrong, we're willing to accept it. And they can go from there. You know where my heart is. I love Main Street Square. I think it's a building block for the future, and I think we should have a group of people that are in the downtown area to really make it happen. If that doesn't happen, I'm sure there's a better way than that it can happen, and let that happen. That's all I can say. But I want to thank you too. Thanks a lot. It was a good session and good discussions and a lot of transparency, and that's the way it should be. Thank you.